Join me as I dive into the history and take on the challenge of exploring how Ekumeku fought back against British colonial rule in Igbo Land. The Ekumeku movement is one of the most significant forms of resistance against British colonial rule in Igbo Land. And today we're gonna explore how this powerful movement came to be and what it achieved. British colonial rule was marked by brutal oppression, forced labor, and the destruction of local cultures and traditions. The Igbo people, already dealing with the devastating effects of the transatlantic slave trade, were forced to adopt European customs and ways of life, suppressed from expressing their own cultural identities. The British imposed harsh taxes, confiscated land, and disrupted the social and economic structures of Igbo communities, leading to widespread poverty, famine, and displacement. Many Igbo people were forced to work in harsh conditions on plantations and in mines, with little to no pay and under the threat of violence and punishment. The British also sought to erase Igbo cultural practices, prohibiting traditional festivals and ceremonies, and destroying sacred artifacts and symbols. The British colonizers also exploited ethnic and social divisions within Igbo communities, pitting different groups against each other and using local leaders as pawns in their game of colonialism by creating artificial ethnic and regional divisions. The British sought to weaken the Igbo people and prevent them from unifying against colonial rule. This divide-and-conquer strategy was particularly effective, as many Igbo communities were already struggling to recover from the devastating effects of the transatlantic slave trade. The British also used their military power to crush any form of resistance, killing and imprisoning anyone who dared to challenge their authority. The Ekumeku movement emerged as a response to this brutal oppression, with many Igbo communities coming together to fight against British colonial rule. The movement was led by charismatic leaders, including Nnamdi Azikiwe, who would later become one of Nigeria's most prominent independence activists. The Ekumeku fighters employed guerrilla warfare tactics, using the dense Igbo forests to launch surprise attacks on British patrols and military bases. They also developed clever strategies to evade British detection, such as using messengers and spies to gather information and coordinate attacks. The Ekumeku movement was not just a violent resistance. It was also a cultural and spiritual movement. Ekumeku fighters believed that their struggle was not just about fighting the British, but about reclaiming their cultural heritage and restoring their communities to their former glory. They saw themselves as the defenders of Igbo traditions and customs, and their fight as a sacred duty to protect their people and their land. The movement was also deeply spiritual, with many Ekumeku fighters believing that they were fighting not just for their lives, but for the souls of their ancestors. One pivotal event that showcases the bravery and determination of the Ekumeku fighters is the Battle of Oguta, where Ekumeku forces launched a surprise attack on British soldiers and mercenaries. killing hundreds and forcing the British to retreat. This battle was a significant turning point in the Ekumeku movement, as it proved that the Igbo people could effectively resist British colonial rule and defend their communities against attack. The Ekumeku movement's legacy is still felt today, with many Igbo people drawing inspiration from their ancestors. Bravery and determination, the movement's fight against British colonial rule paved the way for later independence movements in Nigeria, and its emphasis on cultural and spiritual revival continues to shape Igbo identity and culture today. In conclusion, the Ekumeku movement's fight against British colonial rule in Igbo Land is an inspiring story of resistance and bravery that continues to resonate with us today. What are your thoughts on the Ekumeku movement? Share your comments below. And don't forget to check out my other videos on African history.